Hello, hello, hello. You're now tuned in to another episode of the Melanated Hypothesis podcast with your girl, ToriV, the compassion coach. And it's Friday, so you know what that means. We have another dope guest with a dope perspective. Bryn, okay,
Hello.
can you introduce yourself to the collective, please?
Hey everyone, my name is Bryn Drescher. I'm a mental performance coach and just helping entrepreneurs and athletes elevate their mental game to the next level so that they can get out of their own way, make more money, and just be more successful.
Period. Okay.
Period. That's it.
Okay,
Oh, if
so
you want more, I mean, I live in Los Angeles. I don't know. I don't have much more to say than that. Yeah.
okay, so I'm really interested to know how you got started in the mental game.
Yeah, well, I think the people always ask that, like, how did you decide on athletes or what, so I'm a former D1 athlete. I ran at Michigan State, but the real heyday of my career was high school, just being completely transparent. And I didn't know anything about the mental game when I was an athlete. All I knew was to work really hard and be really good at sports, right? But I was always like complaining, like, oh, we got to do this workout or whatever. I always did it. I wasn't that athlete that didn't do it, but I did, I didn't really understand the mental game or that contribution. And then as I got introduced after high school, college, et cetera, to the world of mindset, I became obsessed. I just was like, oh, this is life-changing, and so my first client was me, taking myself through the process. I definitely thought, because I was born into a certain level of wealth or status, that was going to be my life. And I thought I had a fixed destiny. And I just realized that through doing this and learning all these things, that wasn't the case, and that I could create my own life, or I could go beyond my own perceived limitations. And so that's essentially what kind of brought us to where we are today, which is I started coaching. I think I was initially a life coach, and then I did that for like 5 minutes and had some clients, and then I was really just helping all my friends. And then I don't know how I started with athletes, but someone suggested that I do it. And I went to a basketball clinic, some basketball camp, and I just told all the coaches that that's what I did. And one coach gave me a shot, and that really got me started. And then the pandemic really helped because a lot of people needed that. And, so anyway, I've been doing it for years, but it's just, it's sort of evolved over time. But the biggest thing was just helping people realize what I had to realize, which was everything that I thought was true about myself, about my life, about the possibilities were all, could be changed. And I think many people are in their own way of their own success. So.
Yes, I love that. That is so cool. It's basically you just kept stepping. You started as a life coach for a second, and you was like, and you just
Right.
kept stepping, and it started to reveal itself. Like the purpose started to reveal itself.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
So when we're talking about, so I really love just mindset, and I feel like my story is kind of the same in the sense of I had to start with myself, and my it's kind of different because I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I do the things that like I'm thinking about? What is holding me back? And so it got me into mindset and understanding neuroscience and neuroplasticity. And so getting to that point where I'm like, okay, this is something that I can change. What are I guess, the first steps you would say for somebody that's realizing that, oh, okay, I can change this?
Well, I mean, that really is the first step, is self-awareness. And interesting enough, like when I have an 8-week program that I do with my clients that I work with, and awareness is something that a lot of us, like, you can't change what you don't know. Like, you don't know what you don't know. And that's often where people are. Like, I know I'm stuck, but I don't know why I'm stuck. Or I know I have this feeling all the time, but I'm not sure how or what I can do about it. So to me, it really is, how do I become more aware of my habits, my patterns? So it's like taking really an inventory of yourself, to be frank, and figuring out who you are, how you feel about things, why. And I will say this, like a lot of people, the why, they get really, well, why do I do that? And sometimes that can be helpful, but sometimes that can be a non-starter, because it kind of feels like it's a never-ending black hole of like, I don't know why I do this, right? And then they kind of beat themselves up for not knowing why. Or you get to a point of like awareness, like, okay, now I know I do it, I just don't know how to not do it. And I know I'm doing it and I'm beating myself up. I had a client say that yesterday. It's like, well, yeah, I've been really aware of some stuff, but then I've been beating myself up for being that way. And so then it's like, well, that's when we have to do something drastic and do a pattern interrupt. So it's, okay, I know I want to change something. And the big thing is, like, obviously, if you were going to change your diet, for example, like what you eat, and when I say diet, diet is just a word for eating, like what you eat. That's all it means. It doesn't mean losing weight, like how it's been perceived. So if you were going to change your diet, like from, let's say, eating mostly meat and potatoes kind of diet to something a little healthier, leaner, right? So if you were going to change your diet, and just again, to clarify, a diet is just what you're eating, right? Not necessarily to lose weight, but, it just means that, like this, my diet consists of, meat, potatoes, right? Well, I want to put more greens on my, I want to add more greens into my diet. And that's just what you do, is you add good things, but you don't go from one to the other. So it's like trying to go from a meat eater to a vegetarian or a vegan. It's a little bit extreme for most people and not sustainable. So when we're talking about change, a lot of people say, well, I know I want to change. So they try to change a lot at one time, and then they fail, and then they think something's wrong with them. And it's really just like, you've got to do it incrementally, which is, what's one thing I can add, right? So, and as you add new things, other things may fall away. You may not want to do those old habits anymore. But first, you have to start with what, you need to know what you want to change, know who you are, right? And then go from there. So that's basically, that's where one would start, with self-awareness, and then start to add good things in, start small. And then as you can sustain that, then you can add something else.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Even with me, I'll give you an example. So basically what I hear you're saying is we need to replace things. We can't just jump out the gate. And so one of the things I started this year was I started doing 7-day water fast. So first through the 7th, every month I'll do a 7-day water fast. And the first like 3 months, it was great. Like I was, but then it was like I started on full throttle. So then April, I was like, oh my goodness, 3 days is a lot.
Yeah.
3 days for water fast is a lot. But I had to like literally, I mean, it was very much mental, but I had to be aware that, okay, you started full throttle. So now your endurance is going to kind of start to slack during these next couple months. So I had to be aware of that. And then I had to pretty much put a system in place, a life plan, as I call it, in place, where when I'm in the house, there's nothing that is going to distract me from eating, or not eating. And then when I go out, I have to have a plan, but more so like a mindset that, all right, I'm out, there's food around me, everybody else is eating, but my purpose, what I'm doing is for a reason. So I really had to create this game plan mentally and in action so that I could execute. So that's
Yeah, it's so important. Like, you're speaking to something that I think a lot of people don't realize, which is, in the book we read, there's a book called The Slight Edge, or The One Thing. I don't remember which one it was, but it spoke about motivation is not on will call. So what that means is, anytime you start a task, your motivation is at its peak. So you're like, I'm going to do this, and you're super excited and you get going. But then as the time lapses, so like if it's 7-day water fast, I'm assuming it's 7-day once a month, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you were like, we'll use an analogy like running, right? You were on your 3rd day running. And so that's when it gets hard, because now we're going into like my motivation is going down, and now my programming has to take over, but I haven't quite established. So it isn't so much that you went full throttle. It's just that you probably didn't celebrate right along the way. And a lot of times we don't do that. We just think, I'm just going to do it, right? That's what I got to do. I got to do it. But we don't celebrate ourselves, and our brain is wired to, avoid pain and seek pleasure. So when you're feeling like this sucks, right? The brain's like, well, then just eat, just do something else, like do anything, because you're not like, I love this. This is great. This is for me. I'm going to celebrate this. I did 1, 2, right? And then each day when you wake up, like, I made it through today, no water. What's up? But we don't do that. We're just like, I just got to get through these 7 days. 7 days is a long time to go without any reward for behavior. So it's like, how do I celebrate along the way? Because we've been programmed through schooling and even sports and education that we celebrate the big wins. Like, okay, we're studying for this test, and once we take the test, we can celebrate. But it's like, it's really important to celebrate all your wins, especially the small wins, because that's what helps the brain know, okay, this is okay. We're not hating this. We're not, this is not something I need to help us avoid. This is not something I need to sabotage. This is not something, because, like, obviously when I'm watching Netflix, I'm feeling good about myself, well, maybe not, right? If I know I'm avoiding something, but I'm not like in panic mode. I'm just chilling, right? So like, and my brain's like, cool, we're calm. But as soon as we get into like, this is hard, this is stressful, I don't know if I can go 4 days without water, or 2 more days without water, or whatever the case is. So our brain's like, okay, cool, then we don't have to do that, because if it doesn't feel good, let's find something that does.
Woo, you hit, okay, we gotta dissect that a little bit, because literally, so one of the things, so I'm trained as a behavior technician, and one of the things that we always talk about is reinforcement over reward. And so you're reinforcing, the difference between the reinforcement and the reward is like, the reward would be like employee of the month,
right?
Like, it's a reward, but it's not tailored to you.
Yeah,
it's something that everybody wants. But when you're reinforcing that new habit within yourself,
right.
that is something that you made specifically for you. Like, you like, I don't know, froyo. Like, so if you get through the whatever days, then you go get your froyo, and it's for you. But how many of us actually do that? Like, how many of us even celebrate? Like, I know for me, I was kind of taught to celebrate the attempt. So I never got to the achievement, because everybody is like, oh man, you applied for college. Look at you. She applied for college. But like, did I graduate? Like,
Well, but I think but see, that's the thing. Like, I think that the biggest mistake that we make is an either or. You actually do need to celebrate the attempt, right? Because, my brother's a Special Olympian, and one of the things they say is, if I win, let me win. But if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. And I think it's important that people understand that there is honor in taking a swipe at it. Obviously, we don't use the T word, and you can tell your audience what the T word is. But the point is that most people get caught up in saying that word, but not actually giving it their all, right? So it's more just like, what did I learn from the attempt? What did I learn from this pass at it? What did I learn, right? And so, but yes, you can go get the froyo at the end of the 7 days, but we won't make the 7 days if we don't celebrate along the way. So no, we don't. You can have that reward at the end of the tunnel that is personal to you, but you also need to celebrate day 1. You will need to celebrate day 2. You need to celebrate day 3. You need to celebrate every day, because that is what keeps you going when it gets hard, because it's always going to be hard in the middle. And so, like, you were like, yeah, I got day 1 off. Yes. And then, somewhere around day 5, it gets easy. But it's like going through 3, 4, and 5 is where it's hard. Right. And so it's like day 6, I got 2 days left. I can do this. Right. Like, nah, no problem. But most people don't give themselves that chance because they're so caught up in, I should be able to do this. Why can't I do this? And there has to be some kind of terrible journey, but nobody wants to go on a terrible journey. If I said, hey, we're going to go on this journey and it's going to be through broken glass and, it's going to have spikes and, nobody's coming with me. But it's like, yeah, of course, in the beginning, we're all like, I can do it because I can do hard things. But somewhere along the way, when you get the reality of this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be, or your brain is shouting out for some sort of relief because it's programmed to eat at that time. You programmed your body to do certain things at certain times. You've trained yourself into the habit of anytime you start something to go find something that feels good instead of this discomfort. So you're going against a lot of adversity in that journey because you've trained yourself for something different. And now you decide you want to run a marathon, but you've only trained yourself for a sprint. So that's the thing. Like, that's what people don't get. And so they think something's wrong with them. They want to make it all internal. Something's wrong with me. Why are they successful? It's because they got through that. And some people do it kicking and screaming and they think that's best, but it doesn't work in all instances. So if we could just really celebrate the process, not just the outcome, then it all, and again, and the process and the outcome, not just one or the other, then we'll find, far more consistent results of completing things.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I have Legacy Leap, my group, and we're basically executing. That's the biggest thing, like accountability on execution and doing the inner work. But when I'm in there and I'm talking to people, we're talking about how that execution brings up, before the execution, we'll have a lot of shame. You're sitting in a pool of shame before you actually feel like, okay, let me just do it. How do you deal with shame?
Well, that's the thing, right? Yeah. So you're sitting in shame because you're mad at yourself for not being where you think you're supposed to be, right? And so I think the big thing is like, why is it so hard for me? Why can't I? Right. And that's where I told you before when I spoke about the shame of the why. Like, I don't know why. I just know I'm doing it, but I can't stop myself. Right. It's like when anyone's feeling bad about eating certain foods or doing certain habits or whatever the case is, but it's like, there's no reward in that. You get nothing from it. You just get to feel bad about yourself. And almost in a way, I think the thing that people have to recognize is they get something from the shame. They get something from it. And I know you're like, no, I don't, it doesn't feel good, but it feels good to feel sorry for yourself, because if I feel sorry for myself long enough, most likely someone's going to come along and say, it's okay. It's hard, right? Like, it's okay.
But is that the victim mentality?
It is. That's what I'm saying. It is the victim mentality, because what I'm saying is, at first, the shame is being hard on yourself. Like, you're just beating yourself up. Like, it's like you standing outside of yourself going, you suck. Come on, you can do better. Come on, you should be this. So it's that, right? So it's a little bit of that tough love that we're giving ourselves. But think about it. If you were to take that other person that you're talking to, which is really just you, but and then superimpose the image of a child, would you yell at that child for not doing something, right? But think about, as a child, if you were constantly told you weren't good enough, how often is that child going to have the self-esteem, the confidence, the can-do-ness to actually rise above that? So if you can sort of just imagine, what you're doing is you are attempting to sap out the only strength and motivation that this person has left by beating yourself up. So then if we do it long enough, we become addicted to it. And they're like, okay, I'm just going to keep beating myself up. I'm going to keep beating myself up. And then you'll go find somebody and you'll say, yeah, I don't know, I was just like terrible. And then they'll say, don't be so hard on yourself, right? It's okay. It happens, right? Which is true. But then after a while, we're like, oh, that feels good. I don't have to feel so hard. Yeah, that was a good conversation. So we might start seeking out those conversations, right? And so that's the victim mentality. So beating yourself up, that's just a pattern or a habit that we have. But this is why we typically can't, it takes longer to get up, because I'm telling myself I suck. I'm terrible. I'm awful. And then I'm going, okay, now go run. And I'm like, I don't want to go run now. I want to go lay in bed and curl up and, I don't feel good about myself. Right. So the important thing is, if, in your accountability group and people say like, well, I feel terrible that I haven't done it. All we have is now. The past is irrelevant. The future is unwritten. And the now is what we have control over. So it's like, okay, in the past, I would wait. Now I'm going to take action. So it's more just like reinventing yourself the best you can in that moment to say, all right, well, yeah, no, I didn't do it for 364 days before this, but today is going to be different. And then the next moment is going to be different. And then the next moment is going to be different because I've decided now that I'm done with that. I don't need that anymore to feel like I need to go do it. But we don't recognize it because, most likely the shame is coming from the comparison syndrome, right? We're comparing our day one against somebody's day 300, right? And so that's happening, right? Like, wow, I should be further along by now. First of all, who said? And I don't care if it was your mom, your dad, your grandma, your grandpa, whoever. No one's actually said that you're supposed to be anywhere by a certain part of life. Some people have kids at 20, 30, 40, 50. Some people retire at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Some people get married at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, right? So it's just like, where are you getting these rules from? Because you've adopted some kind of life plan based on the fact somebody else's life plan looked good to you at some point. And then you get in the reality of it. And some people realize maybe they had kids too soon. They're not really that excited about being a mom for 40 years. You know what I mean? Like, but and that's okay to feel that way, right? Like, that's normal. These are like, and normal is such a, crazy term. So don't get crazy about that. Like, I'm not in any way saying there's a such thing called normal. The only thing normal about the term normal is that everyone most likely is feeling what you're feeling right now. You know what I mean? And so we think we're the only person feeling it. And we're just like, oh, I thought I would be like, I'd have my dream job by the time I was 25. I would be married by the time I was 28. I would have my first kid by the time I was 29, 30. And then I would, me and my husband would have the perfect house, or my wife, or whoever, right? Whatever your preferences are. And and then we'd have the white picket fence and the 2-car garage and, the house out in the suburbs and the pool in the backyard. And I don't have any of that. I'm 30 and I'm single and I don't have any, like money in my account and I'm failing. And it's like, well, wait a minute. What are you not seeing that is actually really great about your life? Right? What are you not celebrating that you have been given versus what you thought you were going to have, what you think you should? Shoulding is a terrible habit. We should stop shoulding on ourselves. And yes, I know what it sounds like, but that's exactly what you're doing either way, however you pronounce it. Okay. But the point is that that's what you're doing. And then you're expecting that person to get up and run, and they can't because you've beat them down so much and made it really hard for them to thrive. And so, yeah, the shame, how do you start talking to yourself better? You start bringing everything into the now. You let go of the past. You even let go of the future. And you just look at what is now. What is now, right? Now means next opportunity waiting. No opportunity wasted. So in this moment, I have so much opportunity to do something different. We all have regrets about our past. We all have concerns about our future. But if we could just come to the now, I'm breathing, I'm alive, I've got a roof over my head, I've got money in my bank account, even if it's not as much money as I wish it were, right? Or whatever the case is for those of us that might be feeling a little bit deficient in certain categories. I have food on my plate. There's so much to be grateful for. So gratitude is the best way out of the shame cycle, is just to bring yourself present. And what am I grateful for that I can see right now, that I can feel right now? And then that's going to help you so much more be ready to execute faster. And then break yourself out of that habit of beating yourself up, because no one can be a thriver while they're being abused by themselves.
Yes. Okay. You said so much good stuff. The image that I see when you're talking is, a lot of time I think about, so I see myself as who you're talking to today is current Victoria. And then I have little Victoria, which is foundational Victoria. That's like the little devil on my shoulder. And then I have higher self, and that's like the potential, the little angel on my shoulder. But I see them as two different mentalities. So do I want to stay in foundational Victoria's mentality, and do what I've always been taught, what has been quote unquote normal to me? Or do I want to stretch myself and be in the now and take opportunity? What do you say? Opportunities now. What did you say exactly?
No opportunity wasted, and no next opportunity waiting.
Yes. No opportunity wasted. So if I'm thinking like that, that's a different mindset than what foundational Victoria has, because she's talking to herself with self-doubt, self-pity, and woe is me, all the things. But higher self sees the possibility. Like, I had the vision, I showed you something, so go out there and figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah, well, I like that. The challenge with it is that foundational Victoria talks louder than higher Victoria. And it's more about who you listen to. Does that make sense? So the volume increases based on the one you're listening to. And unfortunately, foundational Victoria, and you even described her, right? Foundational Victoria gets to take up all this space, and higher Victoria is about this tall on your shoulder, right? So we have to think of them as three separate entities that are the same size. But if we're going to shrink anybody down to size, it needs to be, in your example, foundational Victoria, because that's the one that we're listening to. It goes back to the story of the two wolves, right? Yeah, I can hear you.
It's doing the stupid thing again.
It's the heat, girl.
It's not. It's still. Okay.
But yeah, so like there's a story of a grandfather and he tells his grandson the story of the two wolves, and he says there's two wolves inside of you. One wolf does this, one wolf does that. And he says, well, which wolf is, I don't know what the grandson asked the grandfather. And he says, it depends on which one you feed. And so the one we're feeding the most is going to have the most power. So if there's a negative wolf that's always snarling and gnashing at you and all that, and then there's the other one that's just like, supporting you, upping, bigging you up. But we're feeding the negative wolf far more than we ever feed the positive wolf. And so we have to learn to starve that negative energy, but we also have to recognize it sounds like someone is feeding on the, like literally, it's weird. Yeah. There, it was like doing something weird.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like a robot.
See, it doesn't sound like that on my end, but obviously I can't hear you what you're hearing. So am I still sounding like a robot?
Yes. Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It sounds a little robot-y.
Yeah.
Okay, say something.
Hello, 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 hello.
Okay. Okay, do you mind I'm trying to go out and come back in?
Sure.
I don't know why StreamYard doesn't have like it be great. I don't know if I'm gonna take this out or not, because I want people to see the struggles. See all the struggles. And understand that it's just a mindset. When you feel like, oh man, no, I can't put this out. Like, you can. You definitely can. You definitely can. So I don't want to hear that. I'm gonna turn around. Just turning it. Yeah, let's see. Okay. Okay.
Did you find some shade?
Yes, I turned around. So hopefully this helps. Okay. I think we're good. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I was talking about the story of the two wolves, right? And
Yeah.
I was just saying, but a lot of times we're feeding the negative wolf more than the positive wolf. So in that, when people are saying like, "Oh, why can't I just listen to my?" Because I know what's best for me. Well, it's like, but you're listening. Like, what do you? Like I tell my clients, what are you training for? You say you're training for a marathon, but you're hanging out with sprinters, right? And if you don't know what a sprinter is, that's a short distance race, like 100 meters, 200 meters. A marathon is 26.2 miles. Life is like a marathon, but most of us are training for sprints, which it's okay to have sprints, like 2-week sprints or like whatever, where you might need to do that to kind of train yourself into these bursts of like energy and just kind of doing like quick sprints all the time. But you have to understand that if you're not psychologically preparing yourself for listening to your higher self, or repetitively, better said, then you're going to listen to the lower self all the time because that's who you talk to the most. So you're more familiar with it, you know it, you can repeat it on autopilot. You have trained yourself masterfully into that type of energy. And so when you're like, oh yeah, I know, I heard, yeah, I know I should do that. We like that word, right? And I always say the 3 most dangerous words of the English language is I know that, because there's an old proverb saying, whatever you want to call it, that says to know and not to do is not to know. So if I don't do it, it doesn't matter if I know it or not. I don't really know it, because to know it would be like ingrained in me. It's a part of me. It's a fabric of my being. And I don't really know, right? It's like when people say, I know I shouldn't eat this ice cream, but they eat it. So it's like, well, you don't really know it. You just, you've heard that you shouldn't eat ice cream, but you like that ice cream. So you eat it because that's what you do. But then when you start to do something different or be something different, which you're doing springs from your being. So if I start to identify differently, then everything that I do changes. And so that's why you always want to start with your identity before you start with your habits. You can do a habit inventory, but that's why self-awareness is so important. Self-awareness, I'm observing self. Who am I? Who am I being in this moment? Who am I believing I am in this moment? And then once I can change that, because a lot of people think they're fixed, right? This is who I am. That's just who I am. It's like, no, you're more comfortable in that identity than changing anything about it, because you're scared you won't exist. And yeah, you're right. The old you has to die so the new you can live.
Woo, bars. Seriously, because that it's almost a pet peeve for me. It kind of it takes me aback when I'm having a conversation and somebody's like, oh no, that's just the way I am. Like, no, that's probably the way that the world put layers on you. Like, that's what that is, but it's not. Like, we can always change it. It's about, like you said, are you going to put the effort in? You don't really know until you put the effort in. Yeah. So when are you going to commit to yourself and put the effort in? And I have to talk to myself every day in the mirror. I'm like, is this helping you? Is this going to get you to your next level? Like, every day.
Right. Well, I think a lot of people, like, it goes back to that self-awareness. Some people really do think that's who they are, right? They've been told their whole life that's how they've operated. They don't know any version of themselves outside of that. So they really mean it when they say, this is just who I am. A lot of people, just like myself, used to think that you're born into this and this is who you are, right? This idea of like, can people change? That's actually a age-old debate. Like, and some people say people can't change. People can change, but obviously I'm in the camp of, yes, people can change when they are awakened to the fact that there is something different that they are accepting of themselves that they would like to change, right? Mm-hmm. But me having a conversation with you and saying, oh, come on, Tori, you don't have to be like that. And it's like, well, whatever. This is how I survive. I done got this many years this far. So whatever you say, I don't know what you're talking about. And then you'll see maybe a month or 2, a year or whatever down the road, that person will come. They may not come back to you, but they'll be like, yeah, I realized that I was doing this, this, and this. And so I decided to make a change. And you're like, I told you that like 5 years ago. But it's like when they were ready, when they were in a place to receive it, when they were in a place to truly take that effort, that's when they did it. And it isn't going to be based on a pep talk from a friend always. It's going to be the seeds that are planted in their spirit that are going to take root and sprout when it's the right time and the right environment for that individual. And so that's why I always say when people like sit in judgment of others, it's really easy to say that because you're on the other side of your change, but you were them 5 minutes ago. So compassion, empathy, understanding, curiosity, like, hey, so you said this is who you are, right? I would ask more questions rather than tell. So, wow. So tell me, how's that been working for you? Like, like, oh, what do you believe? Like, oh, wow, that's interesting. What do you think led you to believe those things? Like, right. Like, get more curious about where they're at versus telling them what they should be or shouldn't be.
Yeah, no, what do you say? No shitting.
Yeah. No shoulding. That's right. No shoulding on them or yourself.
Yes.
And it's hard.
Yes.
It's definitely hard. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's definitely been a challenge. More so because so let's call that an abundant mindset where you understand that there's growth and there's possibility. So I feel like I had more of an abundant mindset from a child, but I grew up in a fixed area or fixed mindset. So it was constantly like, am I crazy? Like, do
Yeah.
we not see it? Is it just me? And until I started to venture out, find community to where what I believed was considered the normal, and it wasn't like I was crazy. Like everybody feels this way now. That's why, the morning meetup is so powerful to me, because it's everybody believes that.
Yeah.
It's not just a me thing anymore. But then when you go back into these fixed communities, it's almost like, okay, now you have to constantly be fixing yourself in a sense, because you're going to look at another person and be like, well, I did it. Or,
Why
like,
can't
well,
you? Right.
you're right, you'll start. So I ask those Socratic questionings, but sometimes in a fixed mindset, we don't want to hear that yet. Like you said, being able to receive that
Right.
has been
But
another
nobody can
challenge.
argue with the question. Do you know what I'm saying? And so when somebody says, like, there's a
You'd be
great saying,
surprised.
yeah, I think there's a great saying in How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it says, if I were you, I would probably feel the same. I would feel the same way, because if I were you, I would feel the way you feel, right? And so it's just like, Wayne Dyer has this great story that he always told, or at least the one that resonated with me, was that his in-laws would come to visit, and they would express very fixed views about certain segments of society, possibly race, sexuality. I don't know. I mean, I can't remember quite the context. It could have been political views. It doesn't really matter. And he would instantly come back at them. Like, yeah, no, that's crazy. You can't think that way. That's terrible. That's closed-minded. And then he would dig in his heels. They would dig in their heels, and there would be a lot of this, right? A lot of hitting of butting of heads. And then eventually he started to understand, kind of like what Bruce Lee says, be like water, right? So he just was like, okay, that's interesting. I've never thought about it like that, because that's true. I've never thought about it like that, right? Or whatever. And then they softened in their views. They became more open and malleable and not so fixed in their mindset. So it's not so much that I'm seeking to change. I'm seeking to understand. I'm seeking to explore, because I remember I used to think like that, or maybe I didn't ever think like that, but I can understand why someone thinks like that. It goes back to when, for me, when Trump was president, and people were upset that people believed him about the coal mining thing, right? And they were like, coal mining is so past. Like, why would we want coal mining? It's actually dangerous for a miner to work in a coal mine. Why would anyone want them to protect that way of life? And I said to myself, well, let's see. I'm a guy who comes from a generation of coal miners. It's the only way I can provide for my family. That industry is drying up. And how do I put food on the table and face my wife and my children and be able to look, and feel like a complete provider the way that I've always wanted to, right? And it's the way that I can get my kids what they want and feel like I'm doing something productive for my family. So yeah, if somebody tells me they're going to protect my industry and possibly make it so that I can work, because I'm not thinking about the long-term effects on my health. I'm thinking about the fact that I got to feed my baby today. So for me, it was like when people say you're dumb for believing what you believe. I'm not here arguing whether one should like Trump or not like Trump. But what I think is important is that we don't have a lot of compassion and empathy for why someone feels the way they feel, even though it's so counterintuitive to our views. And so it's more just like, if we take a step back and say, like, this person is really just going for, like, the one thing that's universal is that we all want to be the best version of ourselves, provide for the people that we love, and have the best life possible. And so how we pursue that is different, and it may be counter to your way or whatever, but I'm doing the best I can with what I know at the time, and you're doing the best you can with what you know at the time. And if we look at Bryn today versus Bryn 10 years ago versus Bryn 10 years before that, we're talking about 3 different people. And so it's not a matter of that the way that I see today is the way I'm going to see 10 years from now. But the important thing is that I can have compassion and empathy for where you're at. And if I can just get curious about why you feel the way you feel, or at least seek to understand to the best of my ability. I don't have to agree with you, but I can see. And so, and then I get to see you. Then I get to see you and not put a label on you. Like, oh, you're just one of those closed-minded, insert label here. Right? Or because you grew up in that neighborhood. And you said something about the morning meetup. And yes, while there is a group of entrepreneurs that are all coming together and expanding their horizons, they all don't look and feel the same. So, like, that's the thing. Like, there are people at different levels, even within that striation. And so you might meet somebody in the morning meetup and be like, oh, yes, like, we're on the same page. And then you might meet someone else and you'd be like, are you in the morning meetup? You sure? So, so it's just like recognizing, like, that's why I'm a big fan of not putting a label on somebody and then thinking I know about them. Because there's a expression that I like that says, when you label something, you cease to see it. So it's more just like, hey, I'm going to meet Victoria, and regardless of where she's from, how old she is, how she identifies politically, spiritually, sexually, whatever the case is, I'm just going to meet her and the individual, and see what I can discover. And wow, cool. And okay, we don't agree on everything. That's an interesting way. I wonder what made her think like that. What contributes to someone having that type of thought, And then now we're actually meeting belly to belly.
How do you deal with instant gratification?
What do you mean?
So just thinking about what we're talking about, and how a lot of times, well, for me, I can, well, I guess, okay. So I guess past versions of me, I needed more instant gratification. I needed to see it right now, whether it was the reward, whether it was a person that seen my views, whether it was me feeling, most of us, we just want to be seen and heard at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wanting instant gratification to be seen and heard. How do you, but I realized that a lot of my healing is on the other side of that instant gratification, being able to have that self-control and
right.
and sit in whatever I'm feeling.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, that goes back to the reward centers of the brain, the training, all the stuff we talked about. There's something I wanted to say before we answer this completely. I want to go back to the thing of, when I was growing up, and this is going to be not relevant to what we're talking about right this second, but I promise I'll circle back to the instant gratification question. But it came to me when you said the thing, right? And I believe the Bible is a book of, like, principles that wakes us up to, like, what's really happening. So when I was growing up, I was Catholic. I was raised Catholic. And I remember being a little bit bothered by the fact that the only people that could go to heaven were the people that believed the same way that I did, right? If you believe in Jesus, you can go to heaven. If you don't believe in Jesus, you can't go to heaven. And please don't, for lack of a better term, crucify me on this podcast if you believe differently. I am not demeaning or belittling your beliefs. But I said to myself, okay, so if I follow all the rules of the church, right, do everything the priest or the pastor says, I'm going to heaven, right, in the Bible or whatever. But I'm like, but the guy down the street, if he's at the synagogue listening to his rabbi and doing everything that they say, he's not going to heaven because he doesn't believe what I believe. That's weird, right? And someone said to me, well, one day Jesus will reveal himself to them and they'll have an opportunity to come over to the good side, right? And I thought to myself, you mean to tell me my whole way of life that I believed one thing, and then somebody's going to just come to me in a vision and I'm just going to be like, yeah, Judaism is wrong. I'm going to be a Christian, right? But if we take away the dogma of the religion of the labels, right, and we think about it with the mindsets, right, and we say, this isn't about Judaism or Christianity, but we think about it when you come to the fix to the growth mindset or the abundance mindset, as you said, one day that new mindset will reveal itself to that person. And if they are in a good receiving posture, right, then they will step into the light. Does that make sense? So instead of making it about, which is what I think the Bible was attempting to tell us, which it wasn't about being a Christian or being a Jewish or Buddhist or Islamic or Muslim or whatever. It was more about one day you'll feel differently or have an opportunity to feel differently about yourself, about the world, about life. And that is going to be, and then when you're ready, you'll take it, if it's the right time for you. And so our job is, as the other person on the other side of that abundance mindset, if we will, because you haven't arrived, some of us feel like we're so evolved, but we're still evolving. So, but the key is to look at that other person and say, one day they will feel differently. It's our job to know that they will step into the light when it's the right time for them, and not to feel like it has to be when I think it's the right time. Okay. So that's that. And that kind of goes back to your instant gratification question. I want to be able to say something to you. I want you to hear it, and I want you to instantly get it and change. But that's not how it works. Just like I know that I have two choices here. I can go and take the next 5 days of being able to walk this water fast to bring that back, or I can just go eat. That's instant gratification, right? But here's the thing. There is a cost benefit analysis of every choice that I make, right? It's sort of like the fork in the road. So I can't see down that road and it's kind of dark, but I can see all the light down that road. So why don't I go towards the light? Well, but here's the thing. What if there's only light at the beginning of this path, but the path on this side, but it's dark the rest of the way? Whereas this one's dark only around that bend, but it's light rest of the way. So we have to know that the light is always there, even when we can't see it. So it goes back to the faith component, but not in the spiritual sense. If you're not a believer, that's fine. I don't need you to. It's more just like faith in the fact that if I just go and keep walking, eventually there will be light. But if I'm looking for light now, I can find it, but I may be in darkness, because what happens is once you eat during that 5-7 day water fast, you feel terrible about yourself. You then spend the next 5 days beating yourself up for not being the kind of person that could make it through a 7-day water fast. So it's actually a really terrible cost for eating that food, right? And so when we say how do I deal with instant gratification? It's that I make my instant gratification equal. So I say, I'm going to feel good about not eating, just like as if I had ate. So like, in other words, I can taste that food, right? Because that's what happens when you're really hungry. You're like, ooh, I remember what fried chicken tastes like. I'm a vegan right now as I'm talking to y'all on this cast. And I'll tell you, I don't eat meat. Do I remember what fried chicken tastes like? Heck yeah. Do I remember what ribs taste like? Yes. Okay. But I'm not tempted now, right? Maybe when I was new in the game, but and there's a nostalgia to it. Like, oh man, I really loved eating ribs at a barbecue in somebody's backyard. I love that homemade potato salad with that eggs and that paprika. That was some good stuff, right? So that's my feeling of that nostalgia, because it puts me back in the mindset of being in the backyard, having a good time with family and friends and music and all that, right? But my commitment to like being a vegan and what it has done for me, and not the label of vegan, but the diet of what I put in my body, is stronger than my desire to taste that paprika and eggs and all that stuff again. Okay. So it's like, yes, I feel good that I can see that and not want to eat it. I can feel that feeling and not need to succumb to it. So I'm like, good job, Bryn, you're doing great. So that goes back to the celebrating. If you want to have instant gratification, which is fine, you just have to rewire your brain that my gratification will be in the not doing it. And I will make that as great as if I had ate it.
Okay, so that basically, so what I do is I say, oh man, I get to go to the gym today. I
Yep.
get to wake up and eat plant-based. I got my little watermelon here. Sometimes I have like I do mostly fruit or mostly vegetables
Mhm.
or something like that, and I wake up and I say, oh, I get to do this. And so
Yeah.
that's what you're saying with that instant
Yep.
gratification,
Yep. And
switching
you
that
celebrate. And
mentality.
when you get to the gym, you celebrate. I got to the gym. See, that's the thing we don't do. I get to go to the gym today, so I'm celebrating that. I'm excited, right? Just like if I was going to Disneyland or an amusement park or somewhere I'm excited to go. I get to go to the gym today. Today's the gym day, everybody, right? Nobody does that, right? Everybody goes, hey, I'm going to the gym. I got to get my workout in or whatever, right? So it's like, yeah, I get to go to the gym today. Everybody, I'm going to the gym today. And they're like, you're weird. Why do you want to go to the gym? It's like, yeah, I love going to the gym. But when you get to the gym, you got to be like, I made it to the gym. That's what's up,
Yeah,
right?
I
Like
do
you would
look.
be, you were
Okay.
walking right. Like I made it to the gym. What we gonna do? It's an arms day. It's an arms day. And then you're gonna do your first exercise. And you'd be like, got that done. Okay, I did my chest press. I did my chest press, right? So like the whole workout, make it a whole celebration, not just the I get to go to the gym today. Because it might not be sustainable. And at first, I will say it's going to feel artificial. It's going to feel ridiculous. But you do it enough, I promise you, you'll find it's so much easier to do all the things, right? And the most important thing is when it comes to fitness, right? And working out and losing weight and working on making my body feel good, that's great. But again, we're treating a symptom rather than a cause. What's going on internally that has us maybe eating the foods that we eat, doing the things that we're doing, the self-sabotaging behaviors? We always want to work from the outside in. A lot of times you need to work from the inside out. And that's sort of like, that's where you do your journaling. That's where you're doing your affirmations. That's where you're doing the part where you're bigging you up. You're figuring out who you are and what identity you want to be, so that then it's like it's sustainable. Because a lot of people can lose weight, they can fit into the old size, they can get the new job, they can do the whatever, but we'll recreate the circumstances again if we haven't treated what it was inside of us that craved it in the first place.
Yes, that's literally becoming who we're destined to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I talk about with execution, because as you're executing, you're taking those steps, you're becoming, you're doing the thing to be. And it can get out, not overwhelming, but like mundane. Like it can
Yep.
seem like you're not doing anything, or it can seem like it's not working. But when you're doing that journaling, when you're making those affirmations, you're literally reprogramming your subconscious mind.
Yep.
And I think that is so important. It makes me think about, okay, so you had a challenge. What is your next challenge?
So my next challenge is going to be in August. I don't think I'm doing one in the month of July. I'm taking the month of July off as from challenge right now because I have a bunch of clients and I'd have to reschedule them to do a challenge for a week. But in August, I think it's going to be towards the end of August, right? Maybe right before the kids go back to school or right around the time they do. I have a 5-day challenge called the Take Your Mindset Pro Challenge. And it's all about how to have a pro mindset. And it is kind of goes back to the growth mindset, abundance mindset, whatever you want to call it. But there's pro mindset is just someone who really understands. Like I consider what I have as a professional mindset. Like it's a way of life. It's a way of being. Like I am on that mindset at all times. And when I take my departure from it, I'm always coming back to it because I know who I am. I know what I'm doing that's getting in the way. Like, oh, I'm feeling sorry for myself. Not that I don't ever do that, right? But it's like my bounce is so much faster because I have the right foundation to be able to kind of put things into perspective. I understand the world is not doing something to me. I'm doing this to myself. This isn't happening to me. I'm creating these circumstances. So then I have the power and the ability to change it. So it's really about, obviously, a lot of people admire athletes. I work with athletes. So the idea is to give the same principles that I give my pro athletes to people like entrepreneurs and business owners that want to do something different. But the real thing is, of course, everybody wants to execute, like you said. They want to have the success. And just like my athletes, they want to win. They want to go to the top of their sport. But I care more about the person in the journey than I care about the end result. And so who are you being? And how can I help you change who you are? So again, your point of attraction, your point of everything changes as a result.
That's really important. Really getting into, that's what I was going to say. Just it reminds me of your challenge, because getting into that person on the process, like the current self, who I am today, not who I think I am, who I'm trying to be, but actually being super honest in reality and saying, okay, this is where I'm starting at. And then being able to build upon that. But I can't build on anything if I'm not being honest and if I'm not aware.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, and you said use that term reality, and I just have to address it because that's probably one of the biggest disservices, is us thinking there's a shared reality, that everybody's experiencing the same thing that I'm experiencing. And that's not true, right? Even though we're both on this podcast and then there's somebody listening to it, since they were listening to the recording of this, all three of us are having a different experience in real time of the same event. And so like, it's like when, somebody runs in and runs out and everybody goes, oh, that person was wearing green. And the other person's like, no, they were wearing red. And the other person's like, no, they were wearing blue. And you're like, how is that possible, right? That you saw three different things. Or you go to the Yanni and Laurel of the audio of people hearing things differently, or you go to the blue dress and the orange dress, or whatever it is. It starts to show you that everybody doesn't see, hear, or, do the same things. And so once you get that, it's like, my reality is the only reality I need to be concerned with, which is not that I'm saying for my reality is your reality, but once I take responsibility for, I'm the one that is creating this world. Am I creating a world I want to live in? Am I creating a circumstance that, would be something I could thrive in and others could thrive in as well? How I see you actually is the only way you can show up to me. So if I think you're a jerk and you keep showing up as a jerk, I get to be right. So it's like that kind of power, but people don't think about it like that. They're just like, well, she's a jerk. He's doing this to me and the world is against me and I don't want to live like this. And the world's a terrible place. You guys know the world's a terrible place, right? And it's like, and it's just like, well, I don't know. That's not my world that I live in. So I don't know. That's not my experience, right? But I can have that if I want to. I can go and make the world a terrible place. I can make everybody bad. I can think of all the terrible things that are happening. It's all what I'm honing into and tuning into that is going to be magnified in my experience. And so if you want something different, you're going to have to tune in and focus and, first of all, be a bit different point of attraction, but see differently. And the world can only show up the way that you're perceiving it.
Yes, see differently. Differently. That is so important. When you said that, I thought about, you said it too. Everything is my fault. Can you
so yeah, let's talk about that. Because I did say take responsibility for everything. I do want to get away from the word fault, because fault inevitably leads to that other B word, which is blame. And I look at blame as be lame. Okay. And when you're blaming something, right, being lame, even if it's you're crippling yourself to have the power to do anything about it. Okay. Because lame in the old days meant to be crippled, right? If a horse was lame, that meant that it was crippled, and unfortunately they would put it down, things like that, because it's hard to heal a horse's broken leg. And if a horse can't walk, that type of thing. But I don't think they should kill horses. I'm not, don't get me on that. But the point is that in the end, right? Like if I just take 100%, I have two rules and it goes back to the reality thing that I tell all of my clients, all of my athletes. You are 100% responsible for your life and you create your reality. Okay. So when I say responsible, right, it means responsibility, ability to respond. I cannot always control what happened, but I can always control how I respond to it. So when you say everything's your fault, which I know Dave says, I'm like, no, that's bad, because that goes back to the shame thing. It's my fault. It's my fault. It's my fault. No, it's my responsibility. So I am not taking responsibility for you. I'm saying I can only control 50% of this podcast. I can't control what questions Victoria asks me, but I do have the ability to decide if I'm having a good time, how I'm going to respond to the questions, where I want to take the conversation. So if I felt like this was a terrible podcast, Victoria didn't, which I don't, by the way, but if I felt like that, right? And then I said, like, she's not a great interviewer. It's like, well, because she didn't bring out of me what I wanted to say, it's like, I can take it wherever I want to go, right? Like, technically you're giving me free reign to go wherever I want to go with my answers. So I have the ability to do something about it. So when I come off this podcast in a few minutes, as long as I can say I did what I felt was best during that time, then I can leave it at peace. And I don't have to go back and like denigrate the host or do anything like that. But a lot of times we want to blame other people and say, well, if she had asked better questions, I would have gave better answers. Does that make sense? And so it's like, where are you not taking responsibility for your life and then giving yourself an opportunity? It's like, yeah, I could have made a bit different decision. You're right. If I didn't say this, you might not have said that, and we wouldn't be here. So that's responsibility. I don't have to beat myself up. I'm just like, I see where we got there. And next time I don't want to get there again. So what's a different response I can have versus it's all my fault and I need to beat myself up. And then I get stuck in the beating myself up part, right? Because everything's not your fault, right? Let's be honest. It's not your fault that someone abused you as a child, right? It's not your fault.
It's your responsibility.
Yeah,
yes.
It's your responsibility of how I'm going to, what am I going to do with that? That happened to me. It happened. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
What am I going to do with it or about it? Like in the sense of, I can't change that it happened, but I can change how I respond to it, how I identify, how I transmute that into something else. But see, when we say fault, there's all that shame and blame and, just feeling down, right?
Like, that makes so much sense.
So that's why I make the distinction between fault and responsibility. And so once you recognize that you're 100% responsible, then you never have to feel powerless in any situation. So my boss is really mean to me. And I'm like, great. Okay. Do you want to stay at this job? Yes. Right. Okay. Or no. Right. So if the answer is yes, then it's like, okay, how are you seeing your boss? I think they're a terrible person. Okay, well, this might be where you want to start. Because you can't change the boss's action, but you can change how you see the boss. So I can start to secretly go in and, like how it says, go away in secret, right? I can go ahead and I can start to see the boss differently. I can write about the boss differently. I can pray for the boss at night and not pray for the boss to be different, but just say, I see the boss like so kind and loving and has a loving family and, really loves themselves. And I can really start to do that, even though it's hard, right? Just kind of go back to the, the whole thing is, bless them for they know not what they do, right? So if I can just do that over and over again, eventually the boss will be different. I promise you. Now, you'd have to do it faithfully, and you also cannot, and your job is also not to respond in a, because I always say amateurs react and pros respond, or elite performers respond. So my job is to say, okay, the boss is talking to me a certain type of way that I don't like. And you say, okay, what I'm hearing you say is that I could have better performance. I would like to ask, could you give me 3 metrics that I could meet that would make it better for me, so I could be clear on how to do that? And it's hard to do that when you don't like the person and you're like in this place, but I'm going to see the highest version of you, even when you're not showing it to me. And it's not always easy. Oh no, it is not. But but once I decide to react, I'm no longer the version of myself that I like either, where I'm yelling at you or I'm talking about you behind your back, right? So if I can just get to a place of who am I being in this interaction? Do I like who I'm being? Do I like the way I'm thinking about this person? So it's like, okay, I'm just going to listen and love. Okay. I would like them to talk to me differently. So I say, okay, I've heard everything you said. You would like me to work harder, show up differently. There's some things that you think that I could improve. May I ask a request? Sometimes when I hear these things, I am confused at is there things that I am doing well, right? So maybe there's a way to have that conversation, and then you're like, well, I don't feel safe. I can't do that, right? So then it's like, well, why am I staying in this job, right? If I really feel like this person is abusive, why am I staying in this relationship, right? So like sometimes I have to keep this job. It's the only way I can pay my bills. Is that true? So it's that type of stuff, right? Is that true? Because a lot of times, like, well, if I don't want to do that, Bryn, I don't want to journal about that jerk. I don't want to do that. Okay, well then maybe don't, this isn't the job for you. But if you are going to choose to stay in that job, how can you make it work for you? So I had a client who was having a difficulty with her son, constantly feeling like they're fighting. He's making poor decisions. She's getting upset, that. So I said, why don't you start to see your son differently? Why don't you start to change the way you interact with your son? Their relationship is amazing now. And all she had to do was change her. She couldn't change him. She changed her. And that's the problem. We try to change the other person. If they would just be different, I could handle them. But you can't always change the other person. All you can do is do something about what you're doing. And when you change how you respond, typically that other person will as well.
Yes. 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 I'm literally the product of this too. Just thinking about being in a relationship with somebody who wasn't ready for what I was ready for. And in that state, the Victoria back then was trying to change this person.
Yeah.
Like you gotta, why, trying to make them become on my level when I should have left them on their level, kept going. Somebody else is going to be on the next level that I'm on, but I can only be in control of myself. I can't try to pull them along and then be like, they used me. No, you played yourself because you wouldn't let go.
Yep.
So yes,
they showed you who they were, right? Exactly. So it's a lot of times like if I'm going to choose to stay in this, then I have to accept them for where they are and who they are at the time. And a lot of times it's like, well, I don't have the patience or the time to do that. Well, then it's time for a change. I have 3 minutes to let you know. Yeah.
Yes, this was so good. This is so good. Okay, so speed round. I have 3 questions.
Okay.
What does healing mean to you?
Ooh, so I think I think of healing sort of like evolving, right? And I think that healing just means that I'm getting better. I'm more aware of myself and I'm able to take what happened to me and use it for me, right? And to grow from it. So I think healing is growth. I think healing is acceptance. I think healing is just embracing the journey. So, because I think oftentimes people think that healing is like, oh, and that's the other thing I've been saying lately. Like everybody thinks closure is something you take to the other person. Like, okay, I just want to let you know this is how I felt. And then when you say the right thing, then I'll feel better. But it's like closure is just something that I have to kind of like, it's acceptance within yourself. Like, okay, this happened. What have I learned from this? Okay, what actions am I going to do differently going forward? Like, so how am I different? What different actions would I like to do going forward? And how can I just accept that happened and that it was a beautiful thing that I had to experience to become this next level of myself? So that's what I think healing is.
I love it. Okay, what does healing finances mean to you?
Ooh, healing finances. So I think a lot of people like have a really interesting or an abusive relationship with money. They give money too much power, right? And it's like, they say that money is the root of all evil, but the real expression is the love of money. So money is just energy. And so I attract who I am, right? And so like right now I'm having more financial success than I've ever had in my life. But it's more like I changed my relationship with money. So when it comes to healing finances, it's accepting that this energy that seems to be looming over me from my past, my childhood, my family's history, and all that is just like, I need to like change my relationship with money. So part of that is accepting that money is just energy. How do I feel about it? So when you want to heal your finances, you want to look at like, why do I feel this way about money? And what's a different way I could feel about money? What if, I didn't have to look at somebody who has money as like they're selfish, and I could just accept that money, whoever has it, is an opportunity to do many great things. And when I have it, because I always say money is the great amplifier. When you have it, you're gonna be more of who you are. Right. And so like if I was a jerk before money, I'm going to be a jerk with money. It's not like money's going to kill me. Right. So it's more just like, who am I being? And when I look at my finances, how do I feel? How do I celebrate? And if you only got 2 pennies, I need you to celebrate those 2 pennies. I need you to learn to celebrate what you have. I always say, when you have good shepherdship over, when you show good shepherdship over what you have, you'll be given more. So it's really just important to be grateful for what you do have and just kind of sit with yourself and really say, do I really want to have, how's this mindset about finances really serving me? And if I'm broke, then there's definitely something to look at. And if I'm rich, but I feel still like I don't love it, there's something to look at. So it's more about how am I feeling about what I have than it is about that I have it or I don't have it.
Yes. Okay. I'm so grateful that you've come and talked to the collective. Let everyone know where they can find you and get involved.
Yes. So my name is Bryn. You can, obviously, I put my IG in halfway through the interview at Bryn Drescher. So this is my first and last name. So definitely you can follow me on all the platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all that stuff. I'm at Bryn Drescher. And if you're interested in the link in my bio on Instagram and joining my challenge, you can do so. I recommend the VIP. And it's a great way to just kind of jumpstart yourself for 5 days to get into that pro mindset. And and if you're looking for somebody to coach you and you're an entrepreneur or a 9-to-5er that does have a side hustle and you are, or you're an athlete, definitely tap in with me because I just want to help you have the identity and be the person that you truly are, which is more of a subtraction than it is an addition. Let's be real. And then, get you to be that unstoppable force in your life. So thank you so much, Victoria, for this opportunity to be on your podcast.
Yes, thank you for coming, and we're so happy to have you. Make sure that if you're ready to peel back those layers, you connect with Bryn. As always, thank you for watching. Make sure you do some healing today. Peace and healing, y'all. We're out.
Thank you. All right.